Hey y'all, hope you're doing good today. So I am filming in a different place, my backyard, and hoping that it's private enough. I'm a little bit self-conscious, but hopefully it'll work out. It's pretty private back here, so we're gonna move forward with it. But I hope you're doing good. I hope you enjoy the message today, and I'm gonna try my best not to be too much like Alan Watts, you might say. So I'll definitely be sharing some concepts regarding energy and things like that, and but I think it's really going to all come together for a message that's beneficial for you. So again, I hope you enjoy it. All right, and here's the thing, let me share this. I don't know what it is, but at night I'm definitely a night owl, and it's like my brain is just clicking. I wonder if you're the same way. And this is a perfect example of what it's like to experience being receptive to what you might call divine inspiration, where you're in the flow. A lot of artists call it being in the flow. And the problem with that is that if you put it off, if you don't engage with it in that moment, if you don't start writing, start painting, whatever it is, if you're not engaging and putting this inspiration into something in that moment, then what I find is I can't remember it. And I keep telling myself every time I go through this, every time I have inspiration hit me and it's just flowing in. I mean, I could just sit there and write several chapters to a book, for example. I could just sit there and do it. And it's so profound and meaningful to me in that moment. I tell myself I'm not going to forget, and yet I do. Every single time. I would love to hear if you have that experience as well. But essentially, as far as memory goes, isn't that just a wild part of humanity, part of being human, our human experience? Because this is going to kind of be the segue into the message. The fact that we can experience such profound insights and revelations and inspiration one moment and have it be so impactful to us, and yet it doesn't always stick. That feels contradictory to me. It's sort of like, if it's really that impactful to you, why would it not remain in your conscious awareness? And I understand that people have different reasons for their mind not working a certain way or working an alternate way. I know we're all wired differently. I know that things we experience can impact the functioning of our brain for sure, especially things like being deceived for a long time or being put through psychological abuse, basically, gaslighting and circular conversations, and just being made to believe that a person's saying something in this big long monologue, but really there's no substance to it. It's just a bunch of words that sound good, but there's really no message there. And I've learned that this is typically used by con artists, right? People who are looking to manipulate others for the purpose of pacifying you. If you're inquiring about something, if you're starting to figure something out or whatever, a lot of times they'll do this as a means to get your mind busy on that, trying to figure out what the heck they're saying, because they have something else to hide. And so we can certainly come out of these bad situations, which is what my channel's largely about, is healing, right, and growth, and embracing the fact that we are, in fact, forever changed and transformed after going through crazy stuff, It's about embracing that, the fact that we are different now, and trying to heal not just our spirit and our heart, but our mind itself. And so I know that memory can, in fact, be impacted from that kind of stuff. Trauma itself can impact memory. Dissociation, that's what it's largely about as far as my research and my personal experience. It can be to varying degrees on a spectrum, but dissociation in general is because a person is not psychologically or spiritually strong enough to be present during a very horrible situation. So I've learned that we can space out, to lesser degrees, just on a regular basis. And that sometimes may play a part in why our memory isn't, operating optimally the way we would prefer, right? But memory itself has always been intriguing to me, and here's why. If you think about thoughts, right? Do they originate within us or outside of us? And I'm reminded of the verse in the Bible that says that we are supposed to take our thoughts captive and furthermore make them obedient to Christ. In other words, we're supposed to be filtering our thoughts. Well, if we're filtering our thoughts, it sort of alludes to them being external and us, in fact, being a receptive vessel, and so that's interesting. And if you think about that, about inspiration and thoughts in relation to memory and being able to retain these things, and also in relation to when you're in that flow of creative inspiration that seems to be coming, from somewhere other than your own mind, it's because it's just pouring into you. And then once it's gone, it's gone. When you kind of put all that together, to me, it's very supportive of there being this relationship between us and something greater than us, right? And there has to be a reason that all these cultures throughout time have really tried, and I want to say striven? They strived very hard to figure it all out and to make sense of things and to come up with a system, whether it's religion or a philosophy, a way of life, whatever it is, that they can apply to their everyday life and have it benefit them. People have always tried to figure this stuff out, and I don't know that we ever will, but I think we can get to a place where we feel peace and things make sense to us, and you I think that you finally reach a place that you don't have to have that validation from others. And sometimes that means you're not going to fit in with another group, that's all thinking the same way with this group think or hive mind. You're kind of going your own way. You're an outside the box type thinker, and so because of that, you can't put yourself into a box. It just doesn't work at some point. And so there's great freedom in that, and it can be a lot of fun, but at the same time it kind of restricts, I feel like, who all you can really connect to on a very personal basis. You can still get along with most people who are willing and want to get along with you, but I think it also makes you, I don't want to say a target. None of this is in my notes, y'all. I haven't even started my notes. But I think this also makes you, I think that certain people who are very much in their own groupthink, the hive mind, they're just loving the box that they've put themselves in. It's like they can spot you a mile away. This has been my experience. And it's almost like an energetic thing, I know throughout time and cultures and history, people have talked about auras, but I feel like there's some truth to there being this energetic, unseen realm that we are all connected and tapped into. And I think that ultimately, however you want to frame this to make it make sense for you, whether it's like a sixth sense or intuition, whatever it is, I think that it exists. And maybe it's just a matter of semantics. I think that's what you call it, what label to put to it, but it doesn't mean it's not there. And so I have another experience I'd like to share, but it's pretty long, and since I had a long opening, I think I'll hold this for another time. So, part of that verse, and I can't remember, it's in, I think, 2 Corinthians. I didn't write it down, I'll drop it down here. But part of, in the Bible, where it's talking about that we're supposed to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ, it also expands and starts talking about casting down imaginations. And so I was looking up the word imagination in the online etymology dictionary, and it says from the mid-14th century, it's in reference to concept, mental picture, and hallucination. And I think this is hilarious because you've got all these things lumped together, and yet they're very, very different. There's a huge difference between a hallucination and a concept. So it also expands to explain to form an image of, or to represent. And this is in relation to imaginari, right? One of the older words. So to represent, to form an image of, from imitari, which means to copy or imitate. And so, imagination. So the issue we have is when your world has been shaken up and you're reevaluating everything and you're trying to find your place in it again, or through the lens of the hero's journey, you're coming back up to the topside world, you're trying to make sense of everything you've experienced and the wisdom you've accumulated, you're trying to, figure out how to apply it to your life. I'm losing this word now. That's one of the things that I have noticed as a change in myself, is that I have lost vocabulary. And so it's really interesting. I've always been able to write a lot more elaborately and in depth. I have words come up when I'm writing that would never come up in my language. And I think sometimes there's a part of me too that's still a little bit nervous on camera. Sort of like just a low dose stage fright. And that sort of arrests my mind to a degree. And I think maybe that's why I'm having to pause and try and fill in gaps from time to time. But I think it's a culmination too of everything my mind has been through and how it's been worked. And so memory can be affected, including recalling vocabulary terms as well. But I want to talk to you about objective reality and then the layering on top of that. So through the lens of looking at imagination and how it means to represent, okay? If you think about it, and again, I'm going to try not to be too much like Alan Watts. I love Alan Watts. I used to watch his channel a long time ago and his content online, and I've read a lot of his stuff, but it can get really deep. And so I'm going to try not to go too far out there. So every type of representation of objective reality creates a layer that makes obscuring possible. Okay? So just as a part of our trying to communicate with one another, adding language is a layer to our objective reality. Trying to fit reality into a box of comprehension through the vehicle of language is limiting. And so, if you like creative exercises, try this. It's just a simple exercise. It's very basic. Imagine if we didn't have language. Just imagine for a moment. And for me, it's not even possible in my mind to imagine this without also imagining life being very different. Just very simple. So that's fine if you want to imagine that. Life being just extremely simple, no complexity to it whatsoever. But just imagine if we didn't have language. How much that would change the way we perceive our reality. Because at that point, the only thing you would perceive would be from your own engagement and involvement and observations through your own senses. It would all be direct. to you, from reality to you. And what's interesting is, if you think about this, if you have 5 different people in the same environment, in this exercise, right, in this reality where there's no language being spoken, and all 5 people witness the same thing at the same time, it's going to make an impression in their own minds, even within that direct experience, that'll be a little bit different for each person. We know, for example, in looking at an object from different angles, that person's understanding of what they saw can be conflicting with another person's experience, right? And so the point here is, considering that, yes, there's that different angles can cause different perceptions. But still, overall, the point here is everyone's reality without language would mostly be unadulterated. And when that word came to me, I thought, is that the right word? So I looked it up, and it is. So it means not mixed or diluted with any different or extra elements. It's complete and absolute. So, to me, that would be the ultimate experience of, that old saying where it says it is what it is. It's like that's the ultimate experience of that. So we know, again, this is where I wrote down, every angle of observation will produce a different view and therefore different understanding between people and different conclusions. We know that. But if you think about it, space, time, and language, all of these elements, and you can probably think of more, create gaps in direct observation. And what happens is this creates a need for communication, and therefore ultimately you're becoming vulnerable and needing to trust other people to some degree when you consider things like space, time, and language. So as an example, we trust, as far as space goes, we don't have to, but we often do trust another's story that they relate to us about what they saw or witnessed or did across the ocean. So there's an example with space. We can't directly be there. So space is just a reason for layering on top of direct reality, right? So now we have this story that came from another person that's now layered over our direct reality because we couldn't be there because of the problem of space. Then we have the reason for layering being time. We can't be directly, consciously in the past because we're here. So all we have to go on is what's left to us in ancient art and texts and our ancestors, right? And the elderly, and their memories. And again, memories can be faulty. So we're dependent on that. And then we have, again, language. And this is, I don't think when another person is relating their experience to you, I don't think it can be completely objective, even if it's their intention. So all of this creates this layering of subjective reality. It's like stories. It's like, what is it where it's called, maybe it's even in the Bible. I'll see if I can find it and drop in the description. But there's something that says, I think it is in the Bible, now it's as if we see things through a glass dimly, but then we will see, or we will know face to face. That's the perfect example of this experience, this human experience. And a lot of us, again, are catapulted, thrust into thinking about this kind of stuff because we were so trusting. And we had a very jarring experience with deception in one way or another. And that woke us up and it woke us up to the realization that that statement there that I just shared with you is so true. That now it is like we're just looking through, a glass dimly. So, thinking about the word story, and people telling stories, I was reminded of my great-grandma used to say, and my grandmother too, it was kind of passed down through the family. Even my mother would say this to me when I was a kid. They would say, "Don't tell me a story now," you know. And what they meant was, don't lie to me. You know, if the kids came back, from playing out in the yard, they would say something or another, and the grandparents were thinking, yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know if things went down the way you're telling me or whatever. They would say, don't tell me a story. So I was looking up story, and it essentially, the baseline meaning, and again, I was just looking this up in the online etymology dictionary, means a narrative, right? A narrative presumed to be true. And so I was looking up truth, and this was really interesting. To define truth, it said faith. And I would think those are two very different things. So you have faith, faithfulness, fidelity to country, kin, friends, loyalty, etc. So I thought, if you're committed, you're loyal, fidelity and loyalty to country, kin, and friends, that's bias. That's going back to the concept of groupthink, So it's like people are tied together from common beliefs or common faiths, right? And this is how we define truth. I thought that was really interesting. So looking up the Proto-Germanic, you have truaz, Treuwaz, meaning having or characterized by good faith. And then it expanded on that and said English and most other IE languages, I'm assuming that means Indo-European languages, do not have a primary verb for speak the truth, as a contrast to lie. And I thought, how interesting that some languages literally don't even, it's like they recognize that you can't encapsulate truth with one word, because they understand that it's complicated, it's muddied because of the very nature of this human existence, right? And I just want to pause here and say, I understand that there's a huge difference between people who are just living their life and they're honest, good, true people, who love the truth and they're truth seekers and all this, and they don't engage in actively, consciously lying or anything like that. There's a big difference in these people who have maybe unconscious biases and conditioning and things like that, and the people who are intentionally lying and deceiving. There's a huge, huge difference. I just want to say that. I acknowledge that. But I think when you've come out of a crazy situation, you understand that deception is sort of just a part of this whole reality, both intentional and unintentional, And so that's where we're going with this deep dive today. So, but yeah, it said literally they don't have a primary verb for speak the truth as a contrast to lie. So when looking up the word lie, it relates to falsehoods, which relates to deceit. From the 1300s, it means trickery, treachery, and lying, deceit, right? And then that's from Latin, decepere, to ensnare, take in, beguile, cheat. So in looking at this Latin word, decepere, you have the de, which means from, and then you have capere, which means to take. So if you put that together, it means to take from. So now we have this relation of deceit being related to essentially thievery, to take something from someone. What are you taking from someone if you're lying to a person? What are you taking from them? You're taking their reality from them. You're stealing their very reality from them through layering a false story on top of their reality. And so I share this with you to tell you that the reality is still there. It's still there. There's just this story on top of it. So when we talk about digging deep to get to the truth, that's what you're doing. You're uncovering, you're removing all these layers of falsehood. See, to get down to the bare bones as much as you can. You know, like I feel like I'm an archaeologist talking about digging in bare bones, but really. And so, and then what was kind of funny is in looking at, breaking down that word, decapere, I can't roll my R's, y'all, to take from, I was looking at capere, cap, and I was thinking, yeah, I swear I remember back when I was like a teenager hearing people talking like in slang and saying stuff like, don't be capping, don't be capping. And I was thinking, what does that mean? I had to Google it. And apparently it means to lie. And I thought, yes. And yet we know now that this is all related. Because you could also say, don't be taking my reality from me. Don't be capping. Decapere. To take from. Don't take my reality from me. Don't steal my reality from me by covering it up with all this BS, essentially, right? So, yeah, because the Proto-Indo-European KAP, right, which is a root of capere, means to grasp. To grasp. So don't be grasping. Don't be capping. Don't be lying. Don't grasp. Don't take away my stuff, right? So there was this, I didn't put this down in my notes, y'all, but I want to share it with y'all. Oh my gosh, I have so many more notes. I have to make a part 2. I don't want this to be too long. My mind was just going today. I had to really work at it to get it going again, though. So, yeah. Oh, there was this bracelet I found years ago online, and I don't even know if they still have the website going or not. But it was called, I think, the same as what's stamped on the actual bracelet itself. I think the website's name was Live Hands Free. And that was the reminder stamped on all these bracelets. And I got one. And I don't even think I still have it. Maybe I do. I haven't seen it in years. But that's the message, is to live hands free. And I thought, that's interesting. Because at the time, I related it to don't carry heavy things mentally, emotionally, spiritually with you. We all go through hard times, but we don't have to just lug it around like baggage. You know what I mean? Infiltrating our energy and our light, dimming our light and imposing on our happy auras or whatever. We can just kind of lay that stuff down. Like even in the Christian belief system, Jesus calls us to lay things down at His feet. Don't carry it with you. His yoke is lighter, than your burdens you're trying to haul around. And so I thought that was cool. But now this takes on just another level of meaning for me. That you think about carrying and consuming. A lot of these old myths and fairy tales and folklore, they're talking about everything is symbolized and represented in these parables as consumption, sometimes eating or carrying, and there's these characters with this great strength and then other characters that are very, very weak and dependent on these gods or whatever it is. So all these really interesting, creative stories from all throughout, times past and different cultures that I personally believe are multifaceted when it comes to truth. I think that they are true both as far as our inner world and our outer world. But that's just me. And so, but yeah. So living hands free. I'm just now going with this concept in my mind, and I'll share it with you in real time. So this has been, I haven't really identified it or labeled it, but this has been what I have progressed to in my healing. Is that, again, I've learned that it's sort of like a spiritual cord, when you latch yourself into a stronghold within your mind, which is like this structure or this fortress of confinement. It's very limiting. Yeah, you can more easily relate to people in groups that way, but I think sometimes it doesn't sit well with us. Some of us, apparently it's like some people don't have a conscience, or they never second guess things or evaluate. I don't know. But for some of us, we will tolerate and and participate in life this way to relate to a certain group of people that share the same beliefs because we think we're supposed to, but we're living with this inner friction because some part of us knows that we're just creating this prison for ourselves. We're literally stuck and we're not growing. We're not in that flow, which is how I think the Creator intends for us to be, because that is, to me, a good way to frame and understand what it means to be submissive to a higher power who is guiding you as a child, spiritually, thinking of us as children spiritually. And so, I've experienced firsthand what it means to think that I know enough to protect myself. And I've got many other friends and family members who have shared these incredible experiences in their lives too. I'd love to interview them sometime. I don't know if they'd go for it. Where it's sort of like a miraculous experience. I'd love to hear yours too if you want to share it. Where things just happened a certain way, and then they wound up, in hindsight, realizing that they happened that way, and the result was that they were protected from something. I have experienced this too, firsthand. And so, whether you want to call that coincidence or, the hand of the divine entering the scene, that's up to each one of us. But I think that when you slow your life down and you are very contemplative and you're looking back on things and you're trying to be real careful with your choices going forward and all this stuff, what you're doing is you're not hypervigilant in the sense that you're paranoid. You might kind of sway over to that end of the spectrum from time to time because you understand the importance of being careful now and protecting yourself. But the majority of the time, you're hypervigilant, not in a paranoid way, but more in a super observant way. And when that happens, you catch a lot more than you used to. And you can kind of see how it looks like a lot of other people aren't catching certain things. And you start to see this connectedness within all of reality. And it's intriguing and it's beautiful, and it points to, you might say, there being more. I hate to whittle that concept down with more language. The more you put into it, the more labels you put into it, you're just firming up this box to confine it within. So, again, you have the real reality, and then you have layers of deception, both intentional and unintentional from people, right? So what all this does, these layers, is it influences us, okay? It creates influence over our mind and our perception of reality, and therefore impacts our experience. That's huge. That's everything. So if you think about it, let me just share this with you. This was one of the most incredible finds that I found this morning. In looking up the term influence on the online etymology dictionary from the late 14th century, it said, an astrological term, streaming ethereal power from the stars when in certain positions acting upon the character or destiny of men. Also, a flow of water, a flowing in influence. And I thought, yeah. So, if you think about this, just added another layer of Satan, the great deceiver, being called the prince of the power of the air, right? So again, this astrological term, this streaming ethereal power, very air-like quality, this flowing of water, a flowing in. So from the 1580s, It means an exertion of unseen influence by persons. And then in parentheses it said a sense already in medieval Latin, for instance, aquinas, there's another rabbit hole you can go down, meaning capacity for producing effects by insensible or invisible means. So, yeah, and I think that this is sort of like the spell that we're all under to varying degrees, all of us to varying degrees. And a lot of us striving to break that spell and to wake up fully and to see clearly and not through the glass dimly as much, as much as possible to just strip all this BS off and get to the real. So what I was talking about earlier is how, when you get to a place of your healing and your growth where you're really contemplative and you're really working at things, you're really observing and you're studying and you're connecting a lot in your mind, you can start to entertain concepts like separation being an illusion. So, yeah, let me look at my notes, y'all. Hang on. Okay, so let's look at this very simplified concept. Another exercise for your mind. And I'm no scientist, I'm no expert, I don't want to be, this is just a vlog to help you think on your healing journey, your growth journey, your path, whatever. Okay, so I'm sharing my thoughts with you basically. If literally everything is made of the same basic components, I'm looking at my notes, y'all, and I'm not going to nitpick over semantics and academic terms and all that, right? I'm just talking about the same basic components, whatever, atoms and molecules, whatever, okay? So if literally everything is made of the same basic components, then you might shift the concept of separateness in reality to connectedness. So again, we're thinking about this ocean, this flow. It's easy when you look at the actual ocean, the literal actual physical ocean. It's easy to see how all the droplets are connected, but you can't really see that with all the air and the gases in our atmosphere, our immediate environment. You don't, it's invisible. So that really got me to thinking about how we give so much credibility to things when they're simply visible. And that's just one sense that we have. And so, who's to say that everything isn't connected, but we just can't see it, essentially. So to say something isn't valid because there's no visible data to support it feels ludicrous to me. It's kind of like in science, this is just my very basic observation in this area, okay? It's sort of like credibility is given to things when they're visible, but everything else is just sort of like a theory. It's not, even though you have this data over here that heavily supports something and everybody's experienced it and everything, it's sort of like not even given the same credibility as what you can see with your own eyes, even though that can be an illusion too, depending on a lot of things, the light spectrum and all kind of stuff. But if things aren't visible, then it's sort of like they're not even given the same credibility. They're just lumped into this category of theories, really interesting. So again, if we can only prove things with our eyes, imagine if none of us had sight. And this is just something fun you can do if you want to. So when I was in college learning art in my drawing class, one of my first drawing classes I had, we did this activity called a blind contour drawing. And it was where we would look at something on display and we would have to put our pencil on the paper and just stare at this object and never look at our paper and just move our pencil around the outer edge of what we're looking at. And so that's called a blind contour drawing. It's kind of fun. But imagine if you didn't even have that to look at. If we're going to say, okay, the only thing that matters is visual and nothing else matters, we'll just take that away. If we, hypothetically, in this mental exercise, took away sight, then how would we deem anything true or real? Again, if you have a pencil on paper and nobody can see anything and all you're going off is words, well, to move your pencil, you couldn't even relate anything to anything because So sight is critical, first of all, but it's not the only sense we have, and it's not the only thing in existence. There's just so much evidence that isn't given the credibility it should. So many variables that are not considered. It's sort of like, I personally feel like a deep thinker, a really serious truth seeker, can poke a hole in anything if you want to really get down to it. You know what I mean? But most of us have the spirit of wanting to be cooperative, so we're not going to go around doing that. But it's possible. So I want to get down to the point here, which is trusting yourself. Life has taught me that, there's an old saying that says, your gut never lies. And I don't want to sit here and make this an absolute statement that I'm sharing with you as such, an absolute statement, because depending on whoever's listening to this, I don't want you to just take what I say as truth and gospel and run with it. I want you to use your own mind and evaluate things and discern what really is your gut and what's conditioning in your mind and all this other stuff. That's for you to figure out, for each one of us to figure out, right? But essentially, life has taught me how to identify what's what within, regarding what's just a part of my old conditioning, or what's a temporary feeling, and what's a gut feeling that has some real meaning. I have somebody coming to say hello. So, hey baby, it's time for some petting. So, essentially, my conclusion is there is a truth within you. Not only the truth, but there is a truth about, I want to say, every situation. But, fuzzy kitty tail. It comes down to removing all these layers of stories that we tell ourselves and that other people have told us. And so, when I was looking at the word truth, it was in reference to what's real. That's what it said. And then I looked that up. This was just like on Google. I don't know what they pulled from, Oxford Languages or Merriam-Webster or whatever. Truth was related to what's real. And I was like, okay, what's real? It said, what's real is related to what exists. I'm like, okay, what exists? And it said, what exists is objective, right? Objective reality. So, energy is real. Energy is real. And I shared on my community tab earlier a post that has a link to an article about energy in relation to mass and reality. It's pretty interesting. So I'll put that also in the description here if you want to take a look at it. But energy is a real thing. And this old saying, energy doesn't lie, your gut's never wrong, all this is so, so true. And I just wanted to share some thoughts on this and get the wheels turning for you so that you can get to a place of trusting yourself. It doesn't mean you're never going to be willing to consider input from others. It just means that you're never going to just be so vulnerable and so trusting that you allow that to cloud your reality, to take the energetic precedence in your life and be the influence that's in your driver's seat. That should come from within you. And so I think that sometimes we just have to work at figuring all this out. And I think that for me anyway, I have worked really hard to catch myself whenever I have found myself going into black and white thinking, even within like a little topic, either or, either or, either or. And I've tried to bust out all of these frameworks. And let me just say this too. So, have y'all ever heard Eckhart Tolle talk? I love this guy. I think he's really cool. And what really stands out to me is how contemplative he is, even when he's in front of a huge audience on stage and he is giving a speech. He takes his time, not only between statements, but even as he's forming his words to share. And I think it's because I don't want to speak for him. This is just, and I don't like to draw conclusions or make assumptions, but this is just kind of where my mind's going with the wheels turning. Per my experience, you get to a place where you realize that words carry power, first of all, great power. And secondly, the highest wisdom is only capable of being captured for conscious awareness when you maintain a space of openness for this flow to enter into you, this inspiration to enter into you. And that requires you moving out of the way in the moment for that flow to have a passageway. And so you can kind of witness this sometimes in certain teachers where they are in such a place of humility that they are getting out of their own way, even in front of you on a stage. And it's beautiful. And I just wanted to share that. And I know a lot of monks are just very silent in their practice. And now I understand that too. But I just wanted to give you some things to think about, to ponder on, to strengthen your faith in this experience, that even though we go through hard times, what comes out of those hard times is often refinement in us and transformation within us. And even though we have to kind of figure out what that means, it's like learning ourselves all over again. It's like being reborn and trying to, like a baby, learning what the world is and how they fit into the world and how they relate to the world and how everything comes together and makes sense. We're kind of going through that again. And you may come to a place like I have where language fails a lot of times. I'm looking up a lot today and I'm remembering, I'm not even consciously doing it, but I'm catching myself. I'm observing myself as much as possible. In yoga, I was learning that they say, it's a consensus, right? That if you want to receive inspiration, when you're quieting your mind and all the senses, you can turn your hands up, and look up for receiving inspiration. I don't know how in the world that can be considered against Christianity when the Bible talks about the Holy Spirit guiding you. I personally, but that's just me. Or you can turn your hands down for grounding, So there's this delicate dance, there's this balance between remaining open here, not here to others. That's a big, big, big distinction that we have to figure out sometimes, and we pay for. But there's this delicate balance between staying open here and yet being grounded and strong enough in what we know to be true that we aren't swayed in this influential wind of the ether, right? That acts upon the character or destiny of men. It's a balance and it's a dance. I like to think of it like a dance. I've got a little artwork that I bought years ago from a local artist, Amy Thrasher. I don't know if she still paints these little paintings. I forget what her studio was called. I think it was called Barefoot Studio, Barefoot Art. I forget. I'll put it in the description if I can think of it. But she would just paint these little inspirational, colorful signs, and one of them says, "Dance with me." I think I've shared it with y'all before on my channel, but that's kind of how I like to think of it, like a cosmic dance between us and the Creator, us and the Father. If you have a personal relationship, I like to refer to him as the Father. But yes, so I hope this has been inspiring. Remember, energy doesn't lie. My experiences have proven that what I felt without hard evidence was for a reason, because later, a lot of times you get the data, the hard evidence that you need to substantiate and validate what you felt in your gut from the get-go. So that's been my experience. So just don't doubt yourself. Don't doubt yourself. Recognize the traps as much as possible, both intentional and unintentional out here, but stay positive and know that there are a lot of other people who mean well and who are truthful people who are on the same path as you, and you're never alone. So thanks so much for coming along to hear the message. I hope that you have a beautiful day. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you feel called to share them, and I'll see you again very soon.